So good evening and welcome. This is the Deep Dive Sweet Sleep. We're going to get started. Oh, and one more thing though, I do want to remind everybody, if you have a question, please ask me when right away. I don't check the chat till the end, but I will check it. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute and catch my attention so we can answer it right there. Hopefully I can do a good job. This is a really complicated subject. It kind of surprised me. So I'm excited to talk about it. Oh, wait, no, I gotta share my screen and then you can see me start the All right, hopefully everybody's seeing a nice little otter napping on a log there next to the water. So we're gonna talk about sleep tonight. And I think the question that many of you might be asking is, who really needs sleep? I mean, we've got so many things to do. Do we really need sleep added into our schedule? Of course, that answer is probably yes. Hopefully you already know that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Humans spend about 1/3 of our lives sleeping, or at least trying to. I think the recommended daily allowance of sleep is 7 or 8 hours. If you take the average American's life expectancy, which is 77.28, we're going to round up to 78 because it makes it really easy. We spend about 26 years of our lives sleeping. That's if you want to multiply that out, that's over 227,000 hours. If you want to multiply that out, I think it's 1.3 million minutes. So I didn't go into seconds because that's just a ridiculous number. That is a lot of time sleeping. And you would think or hope that there is something important to it. I think one of my favorite quotes about the purpose of sleeping, why do we need it, is from a sleep researcher named J. Allen Hobson, who said the only known function of sleep was to cure sleepiness. When you're tired, and it happens. There's a lot of questions about why sleeping, why is it important, what does it really do? I think this quote was even better. If sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, then it is the biggest mistake the evolutionary process has ever made. Or probably a better way to say it is the evolutionary process has ever perpetuated. Because you find sleep or sleep-like processes in so many different organisms. It is considered one of the considered a very old process that has been conserved for hundreds of millions of years. It's been around so many different species. It's there and it's important. I'm going to spend a little time talking about what sleep actually means and what it means to us, because I think that's important in order to understand how it can be different in some other organisms. This is J.A. Horn. I think his name is Jim. I believe he's from the UK. And I can't remember the name of his of the university he works out of, but he's done a lot of research on sleep deprivation and sleep health. And he concluded that sleep deprivation, after a series of experiments on human subjects, he concluded that sleep deprivation doesn't really affect our physiological stress response or our physical performance. What it does affect is our cognitive function. Some of the subjects in these experiments is reported having distorted perceptions, hallucinations, and an inability to concentrate on mental tasks. Okay, so this conclusion was that sleep appears to be rest for the brain, not the body. There is evidence that suggests that when the body is sleeping, it only decreases metabolism 5 to 10%. That's not as far as a physical rest. That's not a huge decrease, but there are a lot of important things that happen in the brain. One of those is the brain's able to restore its supply of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. That is the molecule that's used for short-term storage and transport of energy. So in quiet waking, the brain is also responsible for 20% of the body's energy use. So, sleep is really able to help recharge the brain and help it, take a rest and get back to doing what it needs to do. Obviously, we have big brains, or at least most of us do. And so our big brains use more energy and they require more maintenance. And so in organisms that don't have as big a brain or don't have a central nervous system, even sleep might not seem as important, but there is value to a resting state for them as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Set this over here and a bunch of notes on this. forward here. This is something that I don't think is anything new to anybody. This is a World War II era poster from the U.S. Public Health Service reminding people to get a lot of sleep, to stay on the job, and whether that's a soldier or whether that's people at home helping support the war effort. This is a really old ad campaign for health, and it's something that people still talk about today. Sleep just seems like I think for a lot of people it seems like such a waste of time. I hate to say that, but I think some people do. They want to do other things. They're like, I can sleep when I'm dead. Well, when you're dead, that's not sleep. Sleep's very different. And so giving your body the chance to restore itself, or your brain the chance to restore itself, is really, really important, has a lot of good benefits. I'm going to interject a few things as I come in through all this, because I've had a lot of experience with it. I use, just a personal anecdote, I use a CPAP machine. I've probably had a sleep apnea since I was in high school, but it wasn't diagnosed till I was in my 30s, into my mid 30s, and it made a world of difference in my life. To go back here for a second, he talks about some of the subjects reported hallucinations and lack, and distorted perceptions. When I get really tired, I have trouble. I will see hallucinations. I'll see things that run in front of my head. I've had that driving, which is very dangerous, in long drives where I need to get some sleep. And a lot of that has went away with using the CPAP and taking better care of my sleep health. And so I'm going to add a couple more things as we move on here, but taking care of your sleep health is very, very important. There's your public service announcement for the presentation. What are the sleep characteristics? At least in humans, it's an altered consciousness. There's an inhibited sensory activity. Muscle activity is reduced, and interactions with the surroundings are reduced. I think this all makes sense. Fancy way of putting a definition on sleep. It can be discerned from wakefulness because there's a different active brain pattern. And when you're asleep, you have a higher sensory threshold. It can also be discerned from things like comas and other types of unconsciousness, because you are able to wake or rouse out of the sleep state, as opposed to some of these other states of unconsciousness, which are not the same as sleep. What's a higher sensory threshold? A sensory threshold is the weakest stimulus, the smallest stimulus, the lightest stimulus that you need, or that you can sense. And when you're sleeping, obviously that threshold goes up. So small noises may not wake you, small sensations may not wake you. I always hear about people waking up to loud sound or something to crawl across them. I had 2 cats and a dog, and I used to get jumped on by them when they would go to do something in the middle of the night. I've woke up to the cats fighting on top of me. So those are obviously above, that minimum threshold to wake you up. But there are, small sounds and other things you may miss. Now your brain has not shut down. I think for a lot of people, you realize that, certain sounds will wake you up. Different sounds might be processed differently and cause you to wake. Smells like smoke can be alarming and wake you up right away. So just different things like that. And different people, if you looked at all things the same, some people just have a higher or lower sensory threshold than others. And so what people are able to sense or perceive while they're sleeping is very, very different. I'm, again, in college, I was obviously going through a sleep apnea that I didn't know was an actual issue. I had a lot of sleep difficulties, and I remember actually sleeping through a fire alarm in my dorm. And it wasn't just the light, or it wasn't just the sound. I went to school where there are a lot of students who are deaf or hard of hearing, and so many of the rooms are strobed. So not only was there a very loud fire alarm going off, it's probably like 2 a.m., but there was a strobe flashing in my room as well, and neither of them woke me up. What woke me up was the resident advisor, who shook my arm, was like, "There's a fire alarm. You need to get out of your room." So having a healthier sleep cycle can help you avoid those issues as well, because that's obviously a sensory threshold I didn't want to miss. So those sensory thresholds, again, are a little bit higher, but they're still things that you will wake up to. I can tell you for a fact that different family members in my house have different sleep thresholds. Some can sleep through anything, and some can't. The slightest noise wakes them up, and then they have a hard time going back to sleep. So what is what are the different kinds of sleep there? There's actually two very different kinds of sleeps, and they're considered distinct behavioral states because there's a different brain activity that occurs during them. And I don't want to get into a whole lot of. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not very good at a lot of chemistry either, so I'm not going to get into too much. But I do want to describe these a little bit because it's important to see the difference. Because um, these kind of states of sleep are something that is a lot more common in mammals and birds, and might have something to do with warm-bloodedness, as opposed to the sleep you might see in other organisms, which may not be as distinct into the two different kinds of states, and it might also have something to do with how sleep developed in those other groups of organisms. So you have non-REM and REM sleep. That REM should be capitalized. Sorry. REM stands for rapid eye movement. And obviously in REM sleep, one of the things, there is eye movement that can be monitored. In non-REM sleep, there is not. So non-REM sleep, which is the first stage, which after transition becomes slow wave or deep sleep. Body temperature decreases, heart rate decreases, the brain uses less energy. This is, and again, I want to focus on, we'll talk about a little bit more about slow wave sleep a little bit later, but that slow wave sleep is really important. If you've ever, I used to, again, because I had these sleep issues, I would often, on a longer drive, pull off into a rest area if I had time, if I was starting to get really tired, and take a quick nap. And a 25-minute, 30-minute nap, if nobody knocked on my door to see if I was having a heart attack, because sometimes people were kindly, and nice and concerned, I was good to go, and I didn't have a problem being sleepy the rest of my drive. Even if I had a full night's sleep, I just wasn't getting, with the CPAP, I wasn't getting past the first stage of non-REM sleep. So I was never sleeping in that deep sleep, because I would have a sleep event and it would pop me back out of it. So I could sleep 8, 10, 12 hours and still be tired. And that's what was happening to me for many, many years. It's just hard to get a decent night's sleep. And whether it was physically how my body was breathing, or if it was something else, I was able to get a breathing machine, and that took care of it. But I was rarely getting into REM sleep at night. REM sleep is a smaller proportion of your sleep time. But this is also the time when you get when you experience dreams or nightmares. There's rapid and desynchronized brain waves. Your eyes do move underneath the lids, and there's a loss of muscle tone, so you might be less likely to move as much during this sleep. Again, another thing, during all those years when I had the sleep apnea, I almost never had dreams. I have a lot more now, and I'm not always sure that's a good thing, but I had a lot less dreams at the time because I was never making it to this stage of sleep. Okay, now the American Academy of Sleep Medicine divides non-REM sleep into 3 additional stages: N1, N2, and N3. And that last one, that N3, is the one that's called the slow wave or deep sleep. These occur in a rhythm. The normal period proceeds roughly as to N1, N2, N3, back to N2, and then into REM sleep. Okay, this takes an average of about 90 minutes to happen. And on an average night when someone's sleeping, that can happen 4 to 6 times. So you figure 4 times 90 is 360. That's about 6 hours. 6 times 90 is 540. You divide that by 60, and it's about 9 hours. So somewhere between 6 and 9, depending on whether you sleep 6 and 9 hours, and assuming you're going through this whole cycle, you'll do 4 to 6 cycles through these different types of sleep as you go through the night. Like I said, there's a lot going on here with sleep. And again, this is, we have this information for humans because you can pay people. You can get volunteers too, but you can pay people to go to sleep with stuff stuck to their skull, and you can read these electroencephalograms. Here's 2 different electroencephalograms. On the left is showing the brain activity and what it looks like during slow wave sleep, this red box here. And then on the right, you're looking at REM sleep, and you can see that difference. So I can't speak to exactly what all the squiggly lines are telling you, but what I can tell you is when you're looking at this, you can see how when people look at these EEGs, they can tell whether the subject has been in slow wave sleep or REM sleep, what kind of sleep they're in at that time and when they went through it. And then if you can take this information and compare it to other species, if you're able to get a species where you can put a monitor on them to monitor for this and get an idea of their brain activity, this can be really, really helpful. And again, it's probably more comparative and more understandable to work on a mammal or a bird with this because we have much similar sleep cycles. Also, it would probably be really hard to, I don't know, put a sensor like this on a jellyfish or a worm, and so there are some critters we might just not get this data for a long time until technology really gets better or improves, or we have other ways to scan for the activity that we need to look for. Also, there is no brain in a jellyfish, so that might also be part of the problem there. But being able to scan and some of the information we have with some of the species I'll talk about in a little bit, we've been able to scan them and get that information from them because of this technology. So here's the sleep station of body. This is a nice little graphic from WebMD. In stage 1, you're drifting off. Your brain waves, heartbeat, breathing, and eye muscles are also, eye movements are all slowing down. Your muscles relax with random twitches. We've all experienced that, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And that's a pretty short time, lasts less than 10 minutes. But that's, there's a lot to get to achieving this. One of the things I always talk about with drifting off is, if you're doing, reading is one thing, but if you're, watching TV, if you've got that kind of light in your face, that can affect your body and make it less likely for your brain and body to settle in. And so what you do before you lay down to try to get into that stage 1 and begin sleep is really important. It can help be part of your positive sleep health. Once you get into light sleep, your body slows down even more, temperature drops, eye movements stop, and your brain has short bursts of activity called sleep spindle. I just love that term. And now stage 3, you're in deep sleep. This is the end of, this is N3. This is the third part of non-REM sleep. And functions slow to their lowest levels. Your body's repairing itself, builds tissue, bone, and muscle. There is evidence that growth hormone is sometimes secreted during this time. So there's a lot going on chemically and physically inside your body that's really, really important. And again, the rest that your brain has and the chance that it has to reset itself for the next day. Stage 4, dream sleep. 90 minutes into sleep, you've got eye movements, heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing speed up. Your muscles go rigid. Your brain dreams, processes information, and stores memories. And then it starts that cycle all over. And again, this happens 4 to 6 times throughout the night. Night starts occur here. If you don't know what that is, we're about to talk about that. And something called sleep paralysis can occur at the very beginning as you're dozing off, or at the very end of the sleep stage when you might be waking up. There's a lot of different kinds of sleep disorders out there. If you think you have one, again, I just want to say get out there and get that checked, because having a good night's sleep is, from somebody who didn't have it for so long, it's the best thing that you can get. It's so wonderful to realize, to get it back and realize what you were missing. So night starts can also be called hypnic jerks, hypnagogic jerks, sleep starts, sleep twitch, myoclonic jerk. It's the this involuntary muscle contraction that causes one to jump or start awake. I have this happen a lot. According to one of the things I was reading, hypnic jerks are a common phenomena, and about 70% of people experience them at least once in their lives, with 10% experiencing them daily. And I'm really happy I'm not. It actually also said that I think men are more likely to experience this kind of jerk than women. That they experience it at a higher rate than women. And if these are frequent and severe, these can actually be a cause of sleep onset insomnia, where you just get settled down and you wake up and then boom, you're right back to square 1 or square 0 even, and it's really bad. I have a GIF I want to show you, and I just want to give people a chance to be ready for it because it's a little jarring. But if you've never experienced this before, A, I'm happy for you, but B, this is kind of what it's like. It can be, I wonder if I can, if I can pause that. Yeah, but I can go back so we're not looking at it again. And it can just happen. And sometimes there's something called, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's like sleep explosion syndrome or something, where people hallucinate hearing a loud noise or loud talking or something right before they go to sleep, and that jerks them out awake. Obviously, what I was showing you there is, if you've ever experienced that, you starting to fall asleep and you have a dream right away, or some kind of image that's occurring in your head, and something in it jerks you awake and jerks you back out of unconsciousness. So it can be all part of that. And again, it could be like a vivid dream, a hallucination. Some people feel it's a shock. They feel like they were falling, and that jerks them awake. So these little things can happen. And again, I have that happen occasionally. I feel like it happens a lot more when I'm really tired. And if I'm well rested and had some good sleep, it doesn't happen as much. That's something that happens a lot. Something else I want to talk about is sleep paralysis, and this is something that can happen at the beginning and the end. It can be. This is, I think, one of the most interesting paintings I've ever seen, because a lot of people refer to sleep paralysis as a explanation for people often talk about scary encounters where someone comes in the room and they're paralyzed and they can't move, and there's this presence, and then it leaves and they're able to move again. It's been linked to accounts of alien abduction or alien encounters. If you go back in the literature several hundred years, obviously you can see this image is very dated. This is a painting called The Nightmare by John Henry Fuseli. It was linked to succubi and demons visiting, and the person was paralyzed with fear. And this sleep paralysis is a state when you're waking up, falling asleep. You feel conscious but completely paralyzed, and you may hallucinate. You may hear, feel, or see pressures, things like that. It can occur in people that are very healthy. It can also occur in those who have narcolepsy. If it occurs a lot, it is definitely something you want to get checked out, because it can be a big problem. About 5% of people may have regular episodes of this. I've never actually experienced this. I've experienced a lot of the night starts. But it's one of those things that, again, if you're having those feelings, it can be a really unhealthy sleep condition that you want to get that checked out. There's a whole list of sleep disorders. Again, I can't stress enough. If you have anything like that, it's worth getting checked out. However old or young you are, it's never too late to start getting a better night's sleep. I didn't want to go into circadian rhythms a whole lot, but there is a lot of information that talks about how there's these rhythms in our bodies and how different things happen at different times. And here's a map of a circadian rhythm of somebody that's, I think, is really neat, the light dark cycle, and what happens throughout the day and what happens throughout the night. The bowel movements are suppressed to get through the night so you can get a decent night's sleep. Where you get your deepest sleep, where your body temperature is lowest. And I just thought this was really fascinating. I want to throw it out there because in case somebody gives me a question. But I want to move on. I want to talk about some critters. So I want to come back to this because I want to look at this from an animal's point of view. When we go to sleep at night, you go in, you close your door. Ideally, for most of us, we're able to find a comfortable place to sleep that we feel safe, or able to sleep out throughout the night. We're not worried about it. It's a very, I want to say, luxurious thing, to be able to go into a room and sleep throughout the night and not be terribly concerned about what's going to happen while you're sleeping. That's pretty awesome. I don't know that a lot of animals have that ability. So again, if sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, that is the biggest mistake the evolutionary process has ever made. And there's a link between, how's that quote? There is a line here. I had a quote I want to say. Essentially, what somebody said was, if sleep is like migration. If you've heard me, I've done talks on migration several times. Migration is a risk. If you're a bird, you're leaving here, the north, you're flying all the way down to the south. You're heading to a place typically where there's actually more predators. You're going to spend several months there. Along the way, you're going to hope that the places you stop to get food are still there. You're going to hope the weather's good. You're going to hope you have the wind at your back. You're going to hope you have all the energy you need to get there. Then you have to have all those hopes on the way back again in the spring. And because you're coming back here. And so that happens, in cycles. That's a big risk. That's a lot of travel, especially for a small bird, that can't pack up a vehicle with all the things they need. They're just hoping that they did what they needed to do to get their body ready. And then they go off, and they're depending on memory and they're depending on instinct. Okay. Sleep is very similar to that. It's a risky thing to do. But if the benefits of that risky behavior outweigh um, the risks themselves, that you get what you need from that behavior despite the risk of failing in that behavior, then you'll continue to do it. And so migration is risky. A lot of birds don't make it, but for the birds that do, they're able to have bigger brood size. They're able to have longer time to feed their young and take care of themselves as well. So that's the benefit that outweighs the risk. The benefit of taking care of your body and getting sleep so that you function better during the day outweighs the risk of getting essentially eaten when you're sleeping. So there's several selective pressures that can influence the evolution of sleep in other groups of organisms. Body size is a big one. If you're really, really big and you want to take a nap, who's going to mess with you? If you're really, really small, maybe you've got to be more selective about how you sleep or where you sleep or when you sleep. Your relative metabolic rate, predation, again, that's a pretty big concern if you're going to fall asleep. The type and location of food sources, are you going to miss a food source? Excuse me. Immune function. These are all selective pressures that can influence the evolution of sleep in different organisms. And I want to make it very clear, because people often talk about hibernation as the animals sleeping through the winter. That is not sleep. It's very different. Dormancy, like that box turtles and snakes and wood frogs and all these other critters go through, that is not sleeping either. It's a different thing. Those are metabolic rates dropping. In hibernation, you go from maybe 100 heartbeats per minute for a groundhog to something like 4 or 6 per minute. You may actually stop breathing. You might take several breaths and maybe not breathe for an hour. Hibernation is a severely decreased metabolic state. It's a severely decreased body temperature. So it is not actually a restful state. When you look at birds and they go through torpor, I talked about this in my wintertime economics. They drop 4% of body fat from the evening into the morning, and they actually have to drop their body temperature overnight so they can reduce their consumption of energy overnight to survive throughout that time. And so they might drop their body temperature 12 degrees. That's not very restful. That gets you through there, but that's not necessarily a restful time. It's not necessarily like, happy, sleepy time for these birds. So let's take a look at the Arctic ground squirrel. I mentioned him when I talked about hibernation and wintertime economics as, one of the champion hibernators. But there's some interesting facts that go with this rodent. So their core body temperature can drop to below 0 degrees Celsius, as low as minus 2.9%, minus 2.9 degrees. Sorry. And that's below freezing, and their body tissues can handle that kind of freezing, and different parts of their body will be at different temperatures. If you've ever seen, actually, no, let me go back here for a second. See how cute that groundhog is? They're curled up to conserve heat. They're curled up to keep as much heat in the core of their body as possible. That has nothing to do with wanting to look cute for their photograph on Instagram or Facebook or social media. That definitely is all about curling up. So when you think about bears, and when they talk about how bears are true hibernators because their body temperature doesn't drop like a ground squirrel, like a woodchuck, that's because a bear is so much bigger. It's going to take so much more energy to heat all of that body that it just doesn't make sense to drop the temperature as far as something like a groundhog or something like an Arctic ground squirrel would drop. Okay, their heart rate slows from 100 beats per minute to maybe 15. They lose 20 to 37% of their body weight over winter. They're living off those stored fats that they've accumulated all through the growing season, the summer season before they hibernate. But there's an interesting fact that was discovered several years ago, is that after spending so much time gathering energy, after going through all these changes to conserve energy, about a dozen times throughout their winter hibernation, these squirrels would warm up almost to their regular body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius, for about a day. And researchers were trying to figure out what was happening here. And what they realized is when you go through hibernation as one of these animals, your brain activity drops almost to nothing. And so if they're measuring them on an EEG, they would see an EEG that for us, they would think this person's dead. There's no brain activity. Nothing's happening up there anymore. Yet they're able to rouse from it. And so what they found was when they roused up to these 37 degrees Celsius, they were seeing brain activity that was similar to sleep. And the thought was, and it's a controversial hypothesis, is that the animals were actually rousing from hibernation to sleep, that as slow as their body was, that metabolism going down, the heart rate, the temperature, all these things, that they had to rouse enough to have sleep because they were going through sleep deprivation from all the physiological changes happening in their body. And that was fascinating. And like I said, for maybe a dozen times throughout their hibernation, they would rouse up to this temperature, and it looked like they were essentially waking up to sleep. And that they were actually seeing that there might have been dreams going on inside their little heads, which I think was really neat. One other thing that was really interesting about these guys is that it's been found that in these ground squirrels and also in some turtles, um, that as they were hibernating, they were accumulating 5 times the normal amount of ascorbic acid or vitamin C in their brains. And ascorbic acid is an antioxidant. And it's thought that when the time comes to revive, that this ascorbic acid was helping to buffer the brain from the sudden influx of oxygen that was coming in that to that point they weren't experiencing. Because again, for when they're hibernating in the case of the squirrel, or bruminating in the case of the turtle, because their metabolism, their body, was not getting as much oxygen, not as much was happening. That a lot of that extra oxygen that comes into the brain could be really, really damaging. Within hours of coming out of their torpor, coming out of their hibernation, those vitamin C levels had dropped almost to normal. And so again, it's thought that that extra vitamin C in there was a buffer to protect the brain from all that extra oxygen. It's important to remember that oxygen is, I don't want to say it is rocket fuel, but it's very similar. When you put gas in your car, it's very, very helpful. When gas gets on something else and it gets lit on fire, that becomes a problem. Pure oxygen is actually deadly to us. When we're taking in atmospheric, when we're taking in air with atmospheric oxygen, it's at much lower levels. Pure oxygen would be actually poison to our lungs. And so having all these, well, that's not very helpful at all, is it? Sorry about that. And they, and so, just like fuel can be used in the right way, can be very, very helpful, but in the wrong way can be very, very unhelpful. Oxygen can be the same way. So having that buffer in their brains helps them to not have a negative reaction to a sudden influx of oxygen. I thought that was really cool. I was really interested there. That there's so much going on there and so many different changes in their body through that. When you talk about sleep in animals, I think the one that the interesting fact that a lot of people think about is horses and horses sleeping upright. Horses have something called a stay apparatus. This is a group of ligaments, tendons, and muscles, and they lock the major joints in the limbs of the horse so they can sleep. This horse is not going into deep sleep, though. This is a light sleep. The horse can be easily roused depending on the stimulus. And so for an animal that might be a prey animal, for an animal that might have to be ready at a moment's notice to run from a predator that's sneaking up on it, being able to lightly sleep on your feet means you don't have to get up. You don't have to shake the cobwebs out. You can just get ready and get going. And so there's a big advantage to this. But this is not a restful sleep. And if they sleep too long in this, then they're going to have other issues. One of the main features of sleep is that if you have a deprivation of sleep, and just about any organism that needs sleep, you'll see that the longer they go without sleep, depending on the kind of stress, the longer they have to recover. Just like if you spent, if you pulled an all-nighter doing whatever, and you went 24 or 36 hours without sleep, when you go to sleep, you're not going to take a 4-hour cat nap and be up and ready to go. You're going to need a longer sleep to help recover, and it can be magnified. And the same is true for any organism that needs that sleep rest. If they're not getting a full restorative sleep, there's going to be a longer time to recover from that. So horses do that. There are several other animals, non-domesticated animals, zebras, elephants, moose can all sleep like that as well, where they can sleep on their feet and be ready to move. But if they're really resting, if it's that deep and more fuller sleep, they need to actually lay down. And you will see that horses will also lay down as well when they're getting a good night's sleep, when they're getting a good sleep. These are dragonflies. These are damselflies, excuse me. And I took this picture one night when I was nosing around in the pond doing another kind of program. I got really excited to find these because these are damselflies that are at rest for the night. Sleep phenomenon in invertebrates is really a much harder thing to figure out. As I mentioned earlier, how do you test for that? Damselflies especially don't have a brain like we do. Their nervous system is very different, and so it can be harder to understand when animals are resting versus in a kind of in an actual sleep state. Unicellular organisms don't necessarily sleep. Some of them do have, pronounced circadian rhythms. There's a thing called the hydra. If you've ever seen that, this is a freshwater polyp. There's a species of jellyfish, and these are organisms that really primitive sleep states have been observed in. The cool thing about that jellyfish is it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have a central nervous system, but we were still able to find a sleep state. So it's obvious that even animals that don't have, a fully developed central nervous system need some kind of sleep in order to recuperate or get back to get restorative rest throughout the night. Fruit flies, it's really interesting. There's a lot of research that's gone into fruit flies because of a lot of research that's gone into fruit flies, there's a lot of ways to measure their cognitive function. And fruit flies appear to sleep, and they also will show cognitive disabilities if they don't get that sleep regularly. If that sleep is disturbed, they will show cognitive disabilities. What that means, you can show fruit flies a tunnel with light and a dark tunnel, and the fruit flies are going to go to that light tunnel because they're attracted to light. You can show them a light tunnel that has something that they don't like at the end of it, and you can show them a dark tunnel that's got fruit at the end of it. And eventually you can train those flies to learn that if they go down the dark tunnel, they're going to get fruit. If you have flies that have been sleep deprived, they will not figure that out as quickly as the other flies that are better rested. And so this fruit flies not only show a need for sleep, but they also show a cognitive I lost my word there. They'll actually show that there's a deleterious effect, I hope I said that right, if they don't get enough sleep, that they are not able to learn as well and their cognitive function decreases. That's what I want to say. So there's ways that they've figured out where cockroaches sleep, where crayfish sleep. They've even seen sleep-like states in jumping spiders, which is really neat. And not only are they seeing regularly occurring bouts of sleep, but they're seeing regularly occurring bouts where their retina are moving, and so they're seeing REM sleep in jumping spiders, which I just think is really, really neat. They've even found REM-like sleep in cuttlefish and octopus. And again, those are really smart critters. If you have paid any attention to octopus or cuttlefish, to the cephalopods, they tend to be really, really intelligent, and it shouldn't be any surprise that they are showing some a need for sleep and for a restorative state to help regenerate what's going on in their little minds. The big kind of sleep I want to talk about, the really neat type of sleep, is this thing called unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Okay, one side of the brain in these organisms sleeps or rests while the other side remains alert. So if you look at this young house sparrow right here, in this house sparrow, the right half of its brain is the part that's experiencing rest or sleep right now. The left half of its brain, sorry. Okay, hold on, I gotta look at the bird again. The right half of its brain is awake, the left half of its brain is asleep, excuse me, because the opposite eye is open. So this bird right now, the left side of its brain is asleep, the right side is awake, and the eyes are connected to the opposite sides of the brain. So this bird right now with the right side of its brain is awake. This is a really good way to rest part of your brain. Again, it's not full deep sleep. The best kind of sleep is still achieved when both sides of the brain are sleeping at the same time. But this kind of rest allows certain animals to get a little bit of sleep, and it helps them to get a little bit of rest. Again, normal sleep is when both halves would be going, and you can I believe that you can get a certain amount of sleep deprivation out of this if you don't get that full bihemispheric sleep. But it's better than nothing, and it's also a safe way to get some rest in while you're also keeping an eye out essentially for predators. There's a lot of birds that use this. There's evidence that bobwhites, the bird on the right here, chimney swifts on the top, and the white-crowned sparrow on the bottom. These are just a few. There's also birds like common blackbird, domestic chicken, glaucous winged gull, Japanese quail, the mallard, which I'm going to talk about in a second. orange-fronted parakeet, peregrine falcon. These are all birds that have shown this USWS, or unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Okay, and it's not just limited to birds. One interesting thought, though, is that this is a frigate bird. Frigate birds have shown this while they're flying and even while they're migrating. So it's thought that some birds that migrate for a very long time may be sleeping while they're flying, and they're shutting down one half of their brain, and they're able to do this. When frigate birds do this in spaces where they might fly for 10 days or more, this sleep, I think, only counts for like 6% of their day. So they're not getting a lot of sleep, but they're getting a little bit. They're definitely building up, I think, a sleep debt, but they're getting a little bit of rest and being able to rest their brain for short periods of time while also staying aloft, which is really, really important. The frigate bird does not have any kind of natural oils to waterproof its feathers. So if it hits the water, it's done. It's not going anywhere. So it's very, very important for this bird that's able to stay aloft and fly the entire time. This is a mallard. This is a pretty common bird around here. Mallards and a lot of waterfowl are also able to sleep with one eye open. And what you'll find in large flocks is the birds on the outer edge, as they're resting on the water, they're the ones that tend to have one eye open, where the birds in the center of the flock may be able to rest with both eyes closed, get a little bit of a deeper sleep. They're all going to react to, one or two birds that suddenly get say freaked out, get scared, or feel like there's a potential threat or predator coming nearby. And again, having that one eye open is really, really helpful. So if you ever see one of these birds, they got their bill stuck back in there and they look like they're sleeping, check and see if one eye's open, because what you'll see there is that unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Pigeons do this a lot too. They're actually also very good at that kind of sleep. There's evidence that some cetaceans do this. Beluga, narwhal, the Amazon River dolphin, bottlenose dolphins, Pacific white-sided dolphins, pilot whale, false killer whale, porpoise, orca, and sperm whale all may use this unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Are you seeing a pattern here? Animals that fly, animals that swim are able to do this. And pinnipeds. This is the Steller sea lions here, this picture of this large gathering, but also southern sea lion, northern fur seal. And so they're seeing this kind of sleeping pattern in these animals that helps. They can do that while they're swimming, which is, I think, fantastic. I would love to swim while sleeping. It would be two of my favorite things. Here's a crocodile. This is an American crocodile. I'm not sure if this species in particular does it, but there are several species of crocodilians where USWS has also been reported in them as well when they're resting. Oh yeah, and even some sharks, even some rays. They have to, a lot of sharks have ram ventilation. They've got to swim so that water's constantly passing over their gills, because they can't make it happen themselves. So swimming rams that water across their gills and helps them breathe. And so stopping to sleep isn't thought to be a very good thing. I remember when I was a kid watching some special, they found some sharks that were sleeping in caves, and that was a big deal. But it's thought that there are a lot of sharks that and rays that may not be able to stop in order to sleep. And so being able to sleep with this USWS can really, really help. There's also some, one of the thoughts about fish that swim in shoals, it's kind of a two-for slide here, that fish that swim in shoals or schools may not sleep at all, because that's simply a lifestyle that doesn't allow for it. So the amount of sleep that critters do have and don't have is really dependent on lifestyle, and might be, that sleep might become a reaction or a result of what they need to do to survive for other parts of their life. That was a lot. Hey, thank you very much for joining me. I'm gonna do this out and end that and just check the chat and see if anybody has any questions. But if anybody has any questions that they want to ask me while we're talking, I know there was a lot there. Again, sleep's pretty tough because we don't know. It's hard to sometimes just get an idea of what animals are sleeping and find test subjects where we can test that and really get out there. So some of those questions would be pretty hard. I see someone on mic. Go ahead if you've got a question. Oh, nope, and back to being muted. Any questions? There's a comedian I like. I'm going to throw this out there because it goes with the sleeping. He has a pretty rare sleep disorder, and I won't tell you what happened to him, but it almost killed him. And he talks in several of his specials about it. But the name is Mike Birbiglia, and he has a special called Sleepwalk with Me, and it's really fascinating and it's very interesting. And if you've ever had any trouble sleeping, I think after watching this, he's a comedian, but he's also a storyteller, and he does a really nice job. And if you don't like language, he's fairly clean, um, and he does a really nice job. And if you have any kind of sleep issues after watching that, I think that would convince you that you need to go see a doctor and get checked out because some of them can be pretty scary. I don't want to scare anybody, but I want everybody to be happy and healthy. So
Say,
yeah,
Ken,
sure.
moles, I guess, spend a lot of time underground. Do they have a 24-hour sleep cycle like
You
normal
know,
animals?
I don't know. That's a really good question, and I think there's probably evidence that they don't. That animals that spend a significant amount of time underground who don't get those light cues might still have circadian rhythms, but they might be triggered by different things. That's a really good question. I know that non-24, if you've heard about that, is an issue for people who are blind and don't see at all, and so they don't have those cues from light, and so it can cause them to sleep at different times of day, or cause them to have a difficulty with their sleep cycle. I know a gentleman who used to come on a lot of my bird trips when we were still doing bird trips, and he had non-24, and he would often be out walking the streets in the middle of the night because just trying to tire out and do different things. He had an amazing memory. He knew the streets of Arlington better than I did, and he hadn't even seen them. I had an absolutely amazing memory from walking for that much, but he did that because he kind of suffered from non-24. Along van rides, he would often doze off during the ride because, he probably wasn't getting the sleep he needed. And it's just, again, so much is for us is cued to the light and dark cycle. And so because of that was Tom, right? Thank you for that question. I'll have to look that one up now. I want to have an answer for you. I'll see if I can find something. And then maybe when I do the link, I can send that out. Nobody has any questions? There aren't any questions in the chat. I'm going to thank you all for joining me. And I'm going to get out of here. So I hope you all have a wonderful night. I hope you all get a good night's sleep. And thank you for joining me, and I'll catch up with you next time.